Parsha, not Parsha. We're not doing Parsha now. We are doing Shas survey. We are in Maseches Nedarim. Oh my gosh, we're already halfway through, almost halfway through Seder Nashim. We've already done Brachos, all of Seder Moed. We've already done Yevamos, Ksubis, and now we are on Maseches Nedarim. Maseches Nedarim is the name of the Masechta connotes and suggests it is all about the laws of making promises, where the Torah tells us in Parshas Matos, if you take a look at the screen, the Torah says in Parshas Matos the following: Ish ki yidor neder la Hashem, that if someone makes a promise, a vow towards God, or they swear an oath. Now, in English, it's very hard to define the difference between a vow and an oath or a swear. In halacha, though, they are two completely different things. They both fall under the category of hafla'a, that of declarations. But they have completely different halachas. There are three types of hafla. There is a neder, which along with neder, we'll say neder and nidava, which are nidrei iser and nidrei hektish, where a person will, through their mouth, either make something prohibited to them, or you make a nidava, that you make a promise. It's a promissory to God that you're going to bring something to the Beis Hamikdash. That's hektish. A shvua, though, is not on an object, but rather a shvua is a commitment to do something. So it's on the person. It's midin gavra, not midin chefza. So a shvua is I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, or I am not going to do X, Y, and Z, but it's related specifically to the person. And it makes a big difference as to whether or not if you took a neder in the language of a shvua or a shvua in the language of a neder. And that's where some of the details, those are some of the details in the first and second parak of Maseches Nedarim, defining some of the differences between a neder and a shvua. Okay. Le'esor isar al nafsho, in order to prohibit his nefesh upon something, says the Torah, lo yachel devaro. So there's a lo sase here. There's a negative commandment that you are not allowed to break your word. You have to keep your word. Kechol hayotze mipiv yaseh. And there's also a positive commandment of doing what you said you were going to do. So there's the negative commandment of going against your own word, and there's also the positive commandment of doing what you said you were going to do. And this is what Maseches Nedarim is all about. There's also one more type of hafla, aside for neder and nedava. There's also nezirus. Nezirus is referred to in the Torah as a neder. The Torah uses the same type of language. The Gemara uses the same type of language. It essentially is a neder. There is a very interesting essay that is brought down in the end of the second volume of the Avnei Miluyim. I'm sorry, the end of the first volume of the Avnei Miluyim. That the Avnei Miluyim says that it's really it's a kedusha b'fnei atzo. It's its own category, nezirus. But just for some simplicity purposes, we generally assume that nazirus, becoming a nazir, is really just a type of neder, because you are osering things upon yourself. You're prohibiting certain items to you, etc. So that's
it's a separate masechta.
It is a separate masechta because there are specific halachos to a nazir, which is why it's its own masechta. But at the end of the day, what type of halacha it is a kinyan. I mean, you could say the same thing that kiddushin is a kinyan, right? So if kiddushin's a kinyan, it should be in bava metzia. No, because it's a specific type of kinyan, and therefore there are unique halachos to kiddushin. So it has its own masechta. But nevertheless, what it is categorically is a type of neder. I wanted to see because it was brought up you guys brought it up last week about just the order of Seder Nashim, and just because it seems a little random, Yevamos, Ksubis, and then Nedarim. So I wanted to show the introduction of the Rambam to the Perush Mishnayos, where he goes through each Masechta and why they're in the order that they're in. So I want to bring it in for Nedarim purposes, but while we're here, might as well see how the Rambam answers the question we brought up last week of why Ksubis comes after Yevamos, the order of the Masechtos in Seder Nashim. So says the Rambam, Achar kal chilik hamamer sheyesh b'Seder Nashim. Now let's break down the collection of Masechtas that are in Seder Nashim. V'hischel b'Maseches Yevamos. It starts with Yevamos. V'hatam she'tzrich l'haskell b'Yevamos v'lo hischel b'Maseches Ksubis. Now, what's the reason that we begin with Yevamos and not Ksubis? V'iyon haseichel nosein. Now, if you stop and think about it, you'll come to realize shahaisa ru'uya lahakdim, that it would make sense to put Ksubis before Yevamos. However, aval na'azazeh mipnei sha'nesuin hu davar omeid b'rishus adam v'ritzono. The reason why Yevamos comes before Ksubis is because Nisuin is something that a person chooses to do. Getting married is something that a person chooses to do, assuming you don't have a very pushy fiance. It's something that a person chooses to do. Ve'ein lebezdin lakof la'adam. A bezdin can't force a person to get married. Ad she'yisa isha aval hayibam. However, yibam hu muchrach la'asoso. It is obligatory to do. It's Torah imposed. V'lomar lo o chalatz o yabam. Either you should do chalitz or you do yibam. V'aschala b'dvarim hamuchrachim hu hanachon v'ha'uri min hadvarim she'ena muchrachim v'aken hiskal b'yavamas. Torah imposed commandments, says the Rambam, need to have precedence over actions that you do out of your own volition, things you choose to do. Getting married is your choice. Yibam or chalitza is not your choice. Which one you do could be your choice, but the having to do something in that scenario, that is not your choice, and therefore that gets precedence over ksubis. The Seder achar kach ksubis, then ksubis, and then the achar ksubis nedarim. Now, why does nedarim come next? Sheparshas nedarim kula vayis bonanush sheyeshba, because all of the topics in Parshas Nedarim, in the halachos of Nedarim, who nidre nashim, they come down to the Nedarim of a woman. Go back to the Psukim. After this first pasuk of Ish ki yidor neder laHashem, that a person makes a promise, okay, to make something prohibited, lo yachal dvaro, kechol yotzid mipiv yaseh, you can't break your word, you have to follow through. The Isha ki tidor neder laHashem v'asra isar bebeis avia b'nu re'ah. And then if a woman takes a neder, and it goes into all of the halachos of whether or not she is still single or married, and it goes into the halachos of how the father is responsible for her nedarim if she's still living in her father's house, and how her husband would then take over the responsibility of her nedarim after marriage, and then the fact that a husband has a certain amount of time in order to be mefer, the hefer es nidareh shaleh, to annul the vow that she took, that he takes over that responsibility. So it's all the halachos of, now that you're married, this is one of the responsibilities that a husband has towards the wife. That's why, says the Rambam, nedarim is going to come after Nisuin, because once Nisuin happens, because once they get married, then the Baala, her husband, has Rishus to be mefer, to undo the nedarim that she creates upon herself. And that's why nedarim comes after ksubis. Now, nedarim really just deals with different scenarios of different types of nedarim. The last two prakim, the 9th and 10th chapter, I'm sorry, the 10th and the 10th and the 11th chapter deal with halachos pertaining to the nedarim that a woman takes and that her husband has responsibility over, or her father has responsibility over, but really the middle part of the Masechta, the major chunk of the Masechta, deals with laws of taking the neder, different languages that can go into the neder. Hektish is discussed because hektish, of course, is directly related to Nedarim. That's basically a summary of Masechta Nedarim. Now, I want to just focus on one of the amazing Gemaras that are within Masechta Nedarim. By the way, something fascinating to point out, you know that the Chassam Sofer writes in a tshuva that Nedarim was the last of the Masechtas that Ravina and Rav Ashi edited when they were putting together Talmud Bavli. When they were putting together the Babylonian Talmud, the last of the Masechtas that were being put together was Nedarim, which is why when you read through Nedarim, it reads differently than any other Masechta. It reads almost like a Yerushalmi. It's almost like they were rushing it towards the end. Of course, it's certainly accurate, but just the language, it's almost like it's a very short language that's used. It's very short sugyas. In fact, the Chassam Sofer says that there's a general principle that's found in the Gemara of halacha kibasrai, that the halacha follows the last opinion. So if that's the case, says the Chassam Sofer, if you have a contradiction between a statement in Maseches Nedarim versus a statement in any other Masechta in Shas, Nedarim is going to win because Nedarim is basrai. Nedarim was the final opinion. That is just an interesting comment from the Chassam Sofer. So I want to just discuss one of the many fascinating halachos that come up in Masechta Nedarim. We saw before that there are a few halachos pertaining to taking a neder. We saw that there is that the person lo yachel dvaro, cannot break his word, and kechol hayotzi mipiv yaseh, that you have to, everything that comes out of his mouth, he has to do. When it comes to hektish, there is one more prohibition related to the obligation you put upon yourself, that the Gemara extends not just to nidrei hektish, but also not just to Nedarim, but also to Nazirus. What is that? It's called Bal Ta'acher. Bal Ta'acher is delaying you coming through on your word. That you have to follow through and you have to actually do the thing you said you were going to do. Says the Gemara that when it comes to hektish, though, let's say I make a neder that I'm going to bring a carbon, you only have shlosha regalim. You only have you cannot let the 3 regalim, the 3 times that we go up to the Beis Hamikdash during the year, pass before you bring up that neder or nedava.
That's not in. That's in. I'm going to say Rosh Hashanah, but I don't think it's there. It's in.
No, the
it's
Gemara
in Seder Moed.
Maybe you're thinking Chagiga. Possible.
It's definitely not in Chagiga because that's what I'm learning now. But there's a whole discussion in one of the Masechtas I've already done where they discuss.
In Rosh Hashanah, you're right. Yes.
Oh, it is Rosh Hashanah.
Yes, you're 100% right. Yeah, the Gemara has a whole discussion about, is it a whole year that you have? Is it a year that you have? Or is it literally the 3 regalim?
They have the 3 be in order.
Do the 3 have to be in order? Exactly right. It also comes up in it also comes up in Beitza. In Maseches Beitza, it also comes up.
Okay.
Yeah. So so this is what the Gemara is dealing with over here, that the Gemara extends that halacha of Bal Ta'acher, not delaying the neder, also extends it to Nazirus. You can't delay Nazirus. So the Gemara says, Bal Ta'acher de Nazirus heichem mishkachasla. What would be an example of Bal Ta'acher, of delaying Nazirus? So the Gemara says, hold on one second. It's not, what do you mean delaying Nazirus? Kivin the Ari, as soon as the person says I'm a Nazir, so Havele Nazir, then you're a Nazir. It's not possible to delay Nazirus. So the Gemara gives a whole bunch of different examples of how you can or tries to come up with what is the solution of having Bal Ta'acher by Nazir. So Rava says, Amar Rava could go into Amar loy efter min ha'olam ad she'eh Nazir, that I'm not going to pass away before I become a Nazir. And let's say a person passes away, but they never accept the Nazirus. So that would be Baal Ta'acher of Nazirus. So that's Rava's case. The Gemara rejects it anyway. So the Gemara goes through a whole bunch of different possibilities. I want to focus on one of the possibilities over here on Daf Dalid. The Gemara says on Daf Dalid and Aleph, Amar, Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar. Rav Yaakov bar Acha said, Kigon, what would be the example? Kigon de Nadar, which in this scenario, we're talking about Nazirus. So you accepted the Nazirus, v'hu bebeis hakfaros, while you are standing in a cemetery. We know that of the halachas of Nazirus, that a Nazir is not allowed to drink wine, they're not allowed to cut their hair, and they are not allowed to become tamei mace. They're not allowed to contract impurity of a deceased body. And that's why a Nazir, like a Kohen, is not allowed to go into not allowed to go into a cemetery. So let's say a person was standing in a cemetery, and then they said, while they're standing in the cemetery, they said, Harini Nazir, I'm a Nazir. So what would be the scenario then? So there's a whole machlokas the Gemara has in Nazir on Daf Yud Zayin, Tes Zayin, Yud Zayin, and in Mesachas Shavuos, I think it's actually the same Daf. I think it's Daf Yud Zayin also. The Gemara has a whole discussion about, has a machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, whether or not the Nazirus is Chal. Rabbi Yochanan says that the Nazirus is Chal, that you actually do become a Nazir while you are in the Beis HaKfaros. And Reish Lakish says, no, the Nazirus is not Chal. You do not become a Nazir until you leave the Beis HaKfaros. That's one version of the Machlokes, and that's what the Gemara focuses on over here. So this would work, meaning that this would be called Baal Ta'acher of Nazirus, meaning I said Harini Nazir, and then there's a delay between the Nazirus kicking in. So according to Reish Lakish, we now have a scenario of Baal Ta'acher, of delaying Nazirus, because you said Harini Nazir, but it's not going to kick in until you leave the Beis HaKfaros, until you leave the cemetery. Okay?
And it wouldn't work if you were like at the barber shop or in the middle of a glass of wine. I guess you'd have to stop.
You stop, yeah. But here I can't teleport, right? I have to walk. I'm meaning I'm still in the Beis HaKfaros. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Right? So according to Reish Lakish, says the Gemara, who says the Nazirus is not binding right away. So then this would work, meaning that this is a scenario of Baal Ta'acher, of delaying Nazirus. However, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that no, while you're in the Beis HaKfaros, you actually become a Nazir. It's a crazy scenario. You actually become a Nazir while you are violating your Nazirus at the exact same time. Mi'ika Baal Ta'acher. So then there's no Baal Ta'acher here. You're not delaying it at all. So now we have to figure it out according to Rabbi Yochanan. And then the Gemara says further, and furthermore, Ha'amar Mar Bar Avashi has a different Masorah as to what that machlokas between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan is. That Mar Bar Avashi says that everyone agrees, that everyone says Chayalei Nazirus la'alter. Everyone says the Nazirus applies right away, that you become a Nazir as while you're in the Beis HaKfaros, even Reish Lakish. The chi pligi. So what's the machlokes? L'inyan malkus pligi. They only argue whether or not you're going to receive malkus for being in the Beis HaKfaros. Meaning, I was standing in a Beis HaKfaros. I said Hareini Nazir. I'm a Nazir. Everyone says at that moment you become a Nazir. The question is whether or not I'm going to get malkus for violating my Nazirus at that moment. Okay?
So you get malchus and you have to bring a korban and you get shaved?
You mean you have to bring a korban because of the Nazirus?
No, don't you have to bring a korban because you became tamei while you're a Nazir?
Right. So yes, of course, you'd have to bring a korban. Yeah. But
so I didn't realize you get malchus as well. I thought that the korban, the penalty was just the korban.
So no, you get malchus for violating, meaning you're violating a law in the Torah. Lo yitama.
But when you violate Shabbos,
Torah, korban is not a punishment. There's a whole discussion in the Gemara why I'm bringing the korban. Am I bringing the korban to restart my count? Because it's like my Nazirus ended, which you have to bring a korban at the end of your Nazirus. So, but the punishment is the malchus. I'm
Okay,
getting
because
lashes.
one of the korbans is an asham or not an asham or a chatas,
No, yeah,
right?
you bring an asham. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Okay. I thought you couldn't get a korban and be what's it called?
No.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like my son, when I punish him, he complains that you can only have one punishment at a time. It's common. He commonly says that.
Well, but maybe
Right,
you're
Rabbi
thinking of the
Tom?
concept. Maybe you're thinking of the concept of kim le midaraba, meaning that if you're getting two at the exact same time, you get the more severe one. But these are two completely separate things.
Okay.
You have to bring out the carbon is for one thing, but no, you get malchus. The Gemara, you're violating a law from the Torah. You have to get malchus for violating.
Yeah, I gotta believe that the Gemara probably knows more than I do.
So, but listen to this now. Hold on one second. Why am I getting malchus though? For violating my Naziris, right?
Correct.
How did I violate my Naziris here?
You became Tame, although you already were Tame.
Hold on. I became Tame, meaning, but how did I become Tame? What action happened for me to become Tame? I'm waiting for Rabbi Tom to ask me this question. Rabbi Tom, if you focus here, I bet you're going to ask this question that all the Rishonim struggle with. I'm standing in the base.
Another question, which is, isn't there already a case where someone had delayed to zero?
Shimshon. He wasn't born yet.
I'm standing.
Like the person that said it before the temple was built.
Wait, Jacob, listen to this. I'm standing in a Beis HaKfaros. I'm standing still. I'm not doing anything. And I say, Hareini Nazir. Says the Gemara over here, I'm getting malchus. I'm getting lashes. Isn't that a lav she'em bo maisa? Isn't that a prohibition without an action? Lav she'em bo maisa ein loken alav.
That's a favorite of the Sefer Chinuch.
Yeah, it's a basic principle that comes up all over Shas. We paskin like Rabbi Akiva against Rabbi Yehuda that lav she'em bo malchus ein loken alav. If there's no action, I can't get malchus.
But there was an action.
Where? Where was the action?
The neder.
That's not an action.
So you can't get that's not considered an action that you actively became a Nazir to be.
But I didn't violate the Naziris actively.
No, technically
I didn't violate the Naziris actively.
Okay, I believe you.
I'm being passive. I
understand. Yeah.
So the Rishonim struggle with this, and there are three different explanations found in the Rishonim how to deal with this issue. Okay, first is the opinion of the Rush. The Rush actually has in a couple Masechtas, but probably most famous is in Nedarim. He has a running comment. There's no Rashi on Nedarim. Okay, what you see on the left side of the screen that looks like Rashi. I'm sorry, the right side of the screen that looks like Rashi. That's not Rashi. It's not Rashi. It's unclear exactly who this commentary is, and actually the Perush on Masechtas Nedarim is actually probably one of the last commentaries you look at. It's rarely even learned. The Rush, because there was no Rashi on the Masechta, actually wrote a running commentary in Rashi style on the Masechta. So the Rush writes that the case over here, the reason why you are getting malchus is because this whole Gemara is assuming like Rebbe Yehuda, meaning Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, who comes up with this scenario of Baal Ta'achar by Naziris, basically is saying the only way that you could have Baal Ta'achar by Naziris is if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that lav she'em bo maisa, that a prohibition without an action, you do get malchus for. So he skirts the whole issue. He says I'm not even going to get involved over here. It must be the Gemara is he says that there's no way to explain it according to the opinion that holds lav she'em bo maisa ein loken alav. It must be over here that this Gemara is assuming lav she'em bo maisa loken alav. You do get malchus. Okay, this Gemara is assuming
locus, no?
What?
I mean, it says aren't they fighting over whether or not you get malchus? So one holds like Rabbi Yehuda and one doesn't.
No, they're fighting over whether or not you Okay, possible. It's
Isn't that
possible.
what it says? Leinian Malkut Pligi?
Yeah, leading Malchus Pligi. Okay. It's possible. Possible whether that they're arguing about whether or not it's a little hard to believe just because Rabbi Yochanan, they both hold that Lav Shem B'Maisa you do get Malchus. They both hold that way. I think that they're arguing even within the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda whether or not in this scenario this is considered violating Lo Yatama. That I think that's what they're really arguing about. But I hear it's possible. I hear. That's the opinion of the Rush. The Ran, who by the way, the Ran is the commentary on Rashi on Nedarim, because there is no Rashi on Nedarim, and even Tosfos was only discovered later on. The Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim, took it upon himself to give you both a Rashi and a Tosfos on Masechtas Nedarim. It is the most delicious piece of Torah literature that we have, if I could say such a thing, is the Ran on Nedarim. In fact, the Tzanzer Rebbe said that. The Tzanzer Rebbe, the Divrei Chaim, said that Gan Eden is sitting with a Shtender and an Nedarim with the Perish Haran. That's Gan Eden. That's Gan Eden.
So his imitation Rashi is better than the actual Rashi?
Oh, this is good stuff, Jacob. Rabbeinu Tam, I hate to offend you. It's no Rabbeinu Tam, but it is the Ran, and it is Gishmak. It is Gishmak. So listen to the Ran says. The Ran says, no, this Gemara is assuming that we paskin Lav Shem B'Maisa Ein Lokan Alav. You don't get Malchus for a passive prohibition, okay? But the reason why I'm getting Malchus here is because in the Beis HaKvaros, this is what he says. I'll read you the words of the Ran. Oh, here, it's over here. In the words of the Ran, it's here. He says, V'lo tzarech Kabbalah kinafik, that you don't need to re-accept the Naziris when you leave the Beis HaKvaros. They're only arguing on whether or not you get Malchus while you're still in the Beis HaKvaros. Ilaki al achilas anavim ba'odo beBeis HaKvaros. If while I'm standing in the Beis HaKvaros, I say Hareni Nazir, and then I pull out of my pocket a bag of grapes and I start eating grapes while I'm inside the Beis HaKvaros, there's a machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish whether or not I'm going to get Malchus for violating my Naziris by eating the grapes. This is the opinion of the Ran. Again, what's the Ran assuming over here? There's no chance you're going to get Malchus for the fact that you're tummy. There's no chance you're going to, because that is Lav Shem B'Maisa. There's no Maisa for the Tumah. There's only a Maisa potentially for if you started eating grapes while you're in the Beis HaKvaros right after you accepted your Naziris before you left. Okay? Comes along the Hagos Maran Ransberg. The Ransberg.
Seems like a bit of a stretch, Rabbi.
Oh, we're only halfway through the opinions of the Rishonim, my friend. Okay.
You said there were three, and now we've done two. So we've done 2/3 of the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. There are four. I said three. No, there are four. Four. Okay. So we've done the Rush. We've done the Ran. Both of those opinions, I agree with you, Jacob. I wouldn't call them a stretch because they are the Rush and the Ran. So who am I to say something like that? But what it is though is kind of getting rid of the issue. We're gonna. It's kind of like saying it's impossible to solve the issue, and therefore it must be you're getting Malchus for a completely different reason. Okay. Comes along the Ransberg, and he points to a Tosfos in Maseches Nazir. Take a look at this Tosfos. Tosfos, dealing with this case, this is where the Gemara deals with the Machlokas between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, says, B'mashe bekabel Nazirus, while you're in the Beis HaKvaros, when you accepted the Nazirus while you're in the Beis HaKvaros, the lav sheyesh bo maisahu, says Tosfos, that this is a lav sheyesh bo maisa. When I am standing in a Beis HaKfaros and I say Harini Nazir, that is a prohibition that has an action. Where is the action? So Tosfos says, you know what the action is? B'ma she'eno yotze misham kishenoder benazir. Because you didn't leave. Because you didn't leave, that's your action. What? What? That's literally the definition of being passive. Why is Tosfos saying that it's called actively violating the prohibition by you not leaving? So the Stipler has a whole mahalach to try and defend Tosfos, where he basically says that Tosfos is extending the concept of lav she'ein bo ma'isa to when your body is violating a prohibition passively, you can't call that ein bo ma'isa. Meaning, if your entire guf, your entire being, your entire essence is entrenched with Isser, you can't call that ein bo ma'isa. It's not passive enough to be called ein bo ma'isa. This is the opinion of Tosfos. This is how he's defining lav she'ein bo ma'isa. Okay. My favorite, though, is the opinion of the Rambam. Okay? Listen to the Rambam, because the Rambam is the hardest one to understand. Take a look over here. The Rambam, when he brings down, again, the Gemara is trying to figure out, how do you have Baal Ta'achar by Naziros? How do you have delaying Naziros? So the Gemara quotes from Marbar of Rav Acha Bar Yaakov that says that that a person accepted Naziris when they were inside of a Beis HaKfaros, and there's a whole machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish as to whether or not you're going to get Malkus or something like that. And that is how you can have Baal Ta'achar of Naziris, because you can't begin your count until you leave the Beis HaKfaros. Fine, until you become Tameh, until you become Tahor again. Okay, that's how you're delaying your Naziris. The Rambam, when he quotes the Psak Halacha from all of this, he paskins like Rabbi Yochanan. Straight up. Listen to this. Misha Nadar, if someone makes their neder of Naziris, v'hu bebeis hakfaros, while they're inside of a cemetery, Naziris chala alav, the Naziris takes effect. You're a Nazir while you're in the Beis HaKfaros. Va'afilu shahasham kama yamim, even if you remain there for a number of days, ein olin lo, your count is not going to start because you're tameh. That's why you're delaying your Naziris. Okay. Veloke, and you get malchus al shihiyaso sham, on the fact that you were just simply standing there. So hold on one second. What? I thought this is a lav she'ein bo ma'isa. The Rambam could have brought down this halacha like any of the other Rishonim. He could have explained it like the Ran, that the reason you're going to get malchus would be only if you started eating grapes. Or he could have said that we don't paskin like this. This whole discussion, like the Rush said, is according to the opinion of lav she'ein bo ma'isa, you do get malchus. But we know the Rambam paskins, lav she'ein bo ma'isa, you don't get malchus for. Says the Rambam, kol lav, any prohibition, she'ein bo ma'isa, that does not have an action, ein loken alav. You don't get malchus for such a thing. So hold on one second. So why is the Rambam?
There must be an exception.
What?
There was a chutz there, which means he had an exception.
Okay, the chutz is nishba u'meimar mekalal es chavero b'shem. Only applies to someone who curses their friend in God's name, meaning using God's name in a curse. That's the only time where you get malchus, because the Gemara in Sanhedrin uses that the exception to the rule. Okay, but this is not the exception to the rule. The only exception to the rule is that becoming a Nazir while you're inside the Beis HaKfaros shouldn't be an exception to the rule. So what's going on over here? Why is it that the Rambam says I'm going to get malchus for simply saying Hareini Nazir while I'm standing inside of a cemetery? So I want to suggest that this Rambam is a proof. This Rambam is a proof for an opinion of the Maggid Mishnah. The Maggid Mishnah Where's the Maggid Mishnah? Give me 1 second. I'm going to get the Maggid Mishnah.
Owen, you've lost a lot of weight. You look like a skinny eye.
Gavin?
You've lost a lot of weight, Owen. When you come back to shul?
It's the same eye. It's the same eye.
When you come back to shul, Owen?
Oh yeah, what's this Shabbos is going to be outside
Yeah.
because of the new rule?
Yeah. Ilan's laning the whole parsha.
Oh, wow. He has to do that outside.
Yep.
So hold it. It's starting at 9 or at 11:15?
9.
Well, what's the 11:15 time that I saw?
That's there's a family service for young kids.
Oh, so another, okay.
Okay. Here, guys, look at this Maggid Mishnah. It's unbelievable. Okay. In Hilchos Chirus, do they not have Hilchos? Oh, is this Hilchos Chirus? Yeah, right over here. The Maggid Mishnah says, okay, here we go. Here's the Maggid Mishnah. The Rambam says in Hilchos Chiros that there's a prohibition of lo sachsum shor bedisho. You're not allowed to muzzle your ox while it's working in the field. Okay, so the Rambam says va'afilu chasma bekol, even if you muzzle it using your voice. What does that mean? Meaning that you see your ox walking over to about to eat the wheat that's in the field, and you say, "Hey, ox, don't eat the wheat," and it stops it. So essentially, your voice has become a muzzle. You've trained the ox per se. So in such scenario, you have violated lo sachsom shor bedisho. Says the Maggid Mishnah a yesod. He writes, that I don't understand. I thought we say it is. Wouldn't this be a lav she'embo maisa? Meaning that when I just use my voice, I didn't do an action there. It's just my voice.
Wait, you get malchus for that?
Yes, you get malchus for that.
Okay.
The Rambam says you get malchus for doing chasima bekol. So says the Maggid Mishnah a klal. He says a principle in understanding lav she'embo maisa according to the Rambam. That according to the Rambam, where is it? He says, oh, here we go. He says, Aval chasima kivan sheyishna b'maisa gamor. You could violate chasima in one of two ways. Muzzling. You could violate muzzling by actually physically muzzling the animal, or through inaction of doing chasima b'kol, the way you train the animal with your voice. Okay? Says the Maggid Mishnah, the whole concept according to the Rambam of lav she'ein bo ma'isa ein lokan alav, that you don't get malchus for a passive prohibition, that's only if it's a purely passive prohibition, meaning there's no way to violate the prohibition using an action. But if one could violate this prohibition using an action, but they choose the non-action route, you still get malchus for that scenario, even though you didn't do the prohibition with an action. This is what the Maggid Mishnah says based off of the Rambam by lo sachsom shor bedisho. So based off of this, now we can understand the Rambam by us, because you could violate the prohibition of lo yitama, of do not become tameh when you're a
By
nazir.
going into the cemetery.
By entering the cemetery, by doing an action. Once there's a theoretical possibility to violate the prohibition with an action, so even if you did it without action, then you are still going to receive malchus for such a transgression. That's geschmack. That's the Rambam so consistent. The Rambam is so consistent. There is another Rambam that I think is in line with this. The Rambam in Perek Yud Tes of Hilchos Psule Hamukdashin Halacha Ches. Let's pull it up. The Rambam writes the following. The Rambam says right over here in Perek in Hilchos Psule Hamukdashin, which is in Karbanos Psule Mukdashin. Psule Mukdashin, Perek Yud Tes Halacha Ches, I think. The Rambam says, no, one second. Maybe Perek Yud Ches Halacha Tes, maybe. The Rambam says here, Aser lahosir mebasar hakadshim, that a person is not allowed to have leftovers from their karbanos. Meaning that if I brought a carbon to Yerushalayim, then and I have to eat it within a certain period of time, either I have one day or I have a day, a night, or I have a day, a night, and a day. Whenever that time period ends, I need to have the entire thing finished. I need to eat the whole thing. You're not allowed to have any leftovers after that point. Shenamar b'karban toda, as the pasuk says by the karban toda, lo sosir mimenu ad boker. You're not allowed to have any extras in the morning. And then the Gemara says, and then the pasuk says, the next pasuk says, well, let's say a person does have extras from their karban. So it says by the karban pesach, v'hanos mimenu ad boker b'eish tisrofu, that the leftovers, there's a positive commandment to burn them. The Rambam says that you don't get malchus for such a prohibition. Why do you not get malchus for violating nosar, for having leftovers? So you would say, Rabbeinu Tam, what?
There's a mitzvah aseh after.
So that's what the Rambam says, because it's a lav hanitak le'aseh. It's a lav, it's a prohibition that is fixed through a positive commandment. He says, v'hamoser ein oloke, you don't get malchus, shahare nitko hakasav le'aseh, because it is connected to a positive commandment. Shenamar v'hanos mimenu aboker b'eish tisrofu, that when the morning comes, there's a positive commandment to burn your nosar. So that's why you're not going to get malchus for violating the prohibition of having leftovers in the first place. But everyone under the sun asks a question on this Rambam, that isn't this a lav she'ein bo maisa? Why is the Rambam choosing the reason to not get malchus for the fact that there's a positive commandment you're going to do? Why doesn't he say that it's because there's no action in your prohibition? You passively had leftovers. So says Rabbi Zalman Meltzer, also based off of that Maggid Mishnah, that the Rambam is consistent, because I could violate nosar in one of two ways. Either I could just passively not eat the karban, and then when morning comes, there's going to be leftovers, and punkt, I'm going to violate the prohibition passively. Or, you know what I could do? I could take the kudshim and I could throw it into the ocean. When does it become leftovers? In the morning. But I've just created a scenario where it's impossible for me to eat it. I violated nosar with an action. And therefore, the Rambam would say that that's not called a lav she'ein bo maisa. So this is a little bit of a taste of the amkus, the depth of Maseches Nedarim, connecting so many different Masechtas, so many different halachas all over Shas, which really you find in Maseches Nedarim. It's geschmack, absolute geschmack. All right, guys, we'll stop here. Next week, Bezrat Hashem, we will be learning Maseches Nazir, God willing. God willing. Okay.
Take a bone shave until then.
Thank you.